Good evening. The San Dimas City Council meeting will come to order. Please rise. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oral communications. Members of the audience are invited to address the City Council on any item on this agenda or not on this agenda. Public comment will not be taken during each individual agenda item except for public hearings. Comments on public hearing items will be heard when that item is scheduled for discussion. Under the provisions of the Brown Act, the legislative body is prohibited from engaging in discussions on any item not appearing on the posted agenda. However, your concerns may be referred to the staff or set for discussions at a later date. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. Madam Clerk.
Mayor, council members, the first speaker is Dave Bratt from the Historical Society.
Good evening, everybody. I am Dave Bratt with the San Dimas Historical Society. I'm here just to remind everybody that on the first Saturday of every month, we offer a guided walking tour of downtown San Dimas. The next one will be June 4th. We all meet at the Walker House in the front porch, or veranda as they call it. The walk takes about an hour and 15 minutes, and the gift shop and museum in the upstairs on the second floor will be open from 10 to 1. So if you'd like to take the to walk, please join us this week from Saturday at 10 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Kathy with Charter Oak Mobile Home Park.
Good evening. In 1948, while addressing the House of Commons, Winston Churchill said, "Those who refuse to learn from history are condemned to repeat it." Let me tell you what I have learned in the last 5 months. I have learned that there is no justice or honor in this chamber. I have learned that words and truth are meaningless. I have learned that when you speak up, your ethics and your integrity are questioned. I have learned that in the council, instead of listening to the constituents that they were elected by, choose to listen to staff. At the study session 2 weeks ago, 123 signatures were ignored by this council. Signatures of residents in our mobile home park that objected to the fact that our right to vote on our resident committee was taken away from us. Instead, the council chose to listen to Haven Management and Chris Constantine. Why have any of you ever questioned why your city manager is so vested in Haven Management, the company that he hired? For over 20 years, that park has run with minimal involvement by the city. Why, you ask? Probably because they hired management companies that knew how to run mobile home parks. Well, gentlemen, I'm no fool. I have learned from history that coming to this council is a waste of time. The concerns of the elderly homeowners at Charter Oak Mobile Home Estates has been ignored, and it has fallen on deaf ears. But what you don't understand, I was told not to give up, to keep speaking up. And I said, why? And they said, because if you don't, they win. What you gentlemen don't understand, you're the they. The sad part is this isn't about winning. This is about speaking up for the least among us. A righteous man once said, if you go into a city and you speak truth and they don't want to listen to your words, shake the dust off your feet when you leave.
Thank you.
Nora Chen with library updates.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, manager, staff, and everyone. Tonight, I'm going to give you the update about the reopening of St. Dimas Library. Finally, we have a reopening date, which will be on June 7. It will be Tuesday, and it's happened to kind of be on the same day with the election day. So our library right now will have new hours after we reopen. The new hours will be Tuesday and Wednesday. It will be 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. And Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, it will be 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And the library will be closed on Monday and Sunday. So it's give us a 5 days service, and we open on Saturday and open 2 nights to kind of balance the service for the community needs. And I know that even the library is closed, and you can see the vote by mail drop box is still working, and still people they are welcome to put their ballots in that drop box. I see the county staff, they kind of clear that the drop box very often. And we also even the library is still closed, and we have the summer discovery program will start on June 1st. Of course, that you can participate in person after the library reopen. However, we encourage you to read us online, and when you read more, you get more prize, and it will be more fun. And that's my update. And I hope that I can see you soon and provide service to all of you in the library. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Those are all the speaker cards, Mayor.
Okay, we'll move on to the consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted with one motion unless a member of the City Council requests separate discussion.
I'll move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. We have a public hearing regarding open space maintenance district 1, track 32818 Boulevard, and the adoption of the resolution confirming the increased assessment for the fiscal year. Scott Wasserman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Can you hear me? Great. This refers to what we call the Boulevard District. And the Boulevard District, it affects 19 homes, the backup to trees and an ivy-covered slope on Paseo Dorado and Paseo Alondra. And the last increase for this district was in 2013, 2014, and that was about a 1.3% increase. In 2006, the residents in these 19 homes, through their vote, they gave the city the authority to annually increase the assessment as long as it's tied to an increase in the consumer price index, and as long as the increase doesn't exceed 7%. So the CPI increase that we experienced over the past year was about 8.5%, and staff is recommending an increase of about 7% for this particular assessment. And that would be an increase of about $37 per year for each of the 19 households. And I'll take any questions if council has any questions.
So for this particular district, it really has been 9 years since we've increased the rates on that one?
That is correct.
Okay.
Any further questions?
And this, you said they voted to allow the city to do that?
Yes, that is correct, in 2006.
And our last increase was in 2013?
That's correct.
14?
Yes.
John, anything?
No questions, thank you.
Dennis?
No questions.
Okay, we'll open a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this matter? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. Comments? Do we have a motion?
I'm inclined to support the increase. It's been a while, and if you average it over time, it's a small increase annually, and the price of everything, including water and landscaping, has definitely gone up. So I believe it's prudent to have this increase. So I will make a motion to. Is there a resolution? Let's see. I guess I need to. What is it here? I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 2022-27 after the reading, wait for the reading and adopt it.
Second.
Any further discussion?
No, I think it's a reasonable increase.
Okay. We have Deborah, read the resolution.
Resolution 2022-27, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Dimas, County of Los Angeles, confirming the diagram and assessment for fiscal year 2022-2023 for Open Space Maintenance District Number 1, Tract 32818 Boulevard.
I moved approval of that resolution adoption.
And Dennis, second.
Second.
Oh,
Second over here with Ryan.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Public hearing regarding Open Space District Number 1, Annexation Number 3, Tract 32841 Northwoods, and the adoption of the resolution confirming the assessment for fiscal year 2022-23. Mr. Wasserman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This assessment district, this was formed in 1978. It includes about 38 homes. In the case of Northwoods, at this time for the upcoming fiscal year, staff is not recommending an increase in the assessment.
Any questions of Mr. Wasserman?
I have a question, but part of it will be covered over by the general fund because this is an excess of amount of money collected, right?
That is correct. So the timing of this, we were not able to process any sort of request for an increase for the Northwoods district. So we need to do that in the upcoming fiscal year, and that just has to do with the lengthy process involved with holding the election for the Northwood residents. So I talked about the Boulevard assessment first. They actually voted and they gave the city permission to increase their assessment on an annual basis. Northwoods has not given the city that permission. So when we do this, we need to obviously do the outreach, consult them, and allow them the opportunity to basically vote on this. So for that reason, that's a long-winded answer to your question, council member, but yes, if this is, this will potentially require a subsidy from the general fund to provide the same level of service to Northwoods.
Chris?
Fine, thank you.
If I may clarify, all of these end up being self-assessments on residents, and so when the resolutions and the tax is first put into place, or the assessments, it's as written in the language. And in some cases, we've had CPI included and authorized, in others we haven't. And in some cases, the city has corrected the missing CPI so that cost increases that happen annually can be passed on. In this case, it was not. And so as Scott's relating the timeline associated with the change, it's a timeline actually changing the actual assessment itself, as opposed to considering an engineer's report that costs have increased and just bringing forward a resolution to council. So the process is different than it would be on the last assessment. And I just wanted to make that clarity.
Thank you, Chris.
Just out of curiosity on that one, when was the last time that they did vote to increase the?
2008 was the last increase.
Okay.
That's the type of vote where we tell them we'd like to do the increase, and they basically can vote negative to not increase it, and you need over 50%, I believe, for that to negate and not have the increase. So it sounds like the last time we tried that was in 2008.
That is my understanding. I've not experienced this firsthand because I wasn't here, but that is my understanding. I don't know if
No, let me speak to that. I think what you're talking about is the Prop 218 protest
Okay,
hearing
so
process.
so
in a
please
Prop
clarify,
28
strike everything I said.
With like a sewer assessment or something like that, yes, you would have to, you're voting to say no, and you have to receive 50% plus one to say, nope, you can't impose that change. In an assessment, the residents are voting to assess themselves. And so if we're going to change the assessment, then 50% plus one of the residents must say, or the housing units must say yes to that change. The assessment as passed runs through January 1 of 2027 when it expires, so it would naturally just end that obligation. However, because there was no CPI originally placed in the assessment, there is zero mechanism other than revisiting the entire assessment as if it's a brand new assessment to consider adding that into the assessment, which means when we do landscape and we're asking Nieves or WCA to do work, if our contracts include CPI increases, which they both do, as the CPI increases, you cannot go back to the residents to ask for that increase unless you go back and say, we want to reconsider the entire assessment, which is a very drawn out process. And so as the costs increase, you're either reducing service, which the council has already given direction they do not want to do, and we're not going to, or you're going to subsidize that activity in the general fund, or you're going to go back out to the residents and change the assessment, or the last option, which was given as direction by the council, to engage the residents on understanding the implications of what's happening and involving them in the decision making of that process, which may also mean just concluding the city addressing that maintenance requirement. But no matter what we do, come January 1st of 2027, if no action is taken, the assessment goes completely away.
And then the homeowners will have to put their own project together to maintain the slopes.
I think Steve's sitting in the back. Steve? Yes.
We
that
can
is correct.
require them to form a homeowners association?
I don't know the best mechanism we could choose, but it becomes a private obligation because the underlying land is private. It's not owned by the city.
Mm-hmm.
The city has it's not uncommon to have an assessment district to cover costs that's a mutual benefit with multiple homes. But most of the time it ends up being public land that some service has to occur on it. In this case, it's a little more unusual. It's a private property that there was some collective good having the city maintain it, and the residents, or at that time could have been the developer, agreed to put that assessment in place.
I don't think so just so I understand correctly, then there's inequity in this throughout the city. That we're in fact passing on taxing a group of people that's going to cost the city money, and then we're taxing other people just because there was poor governance in 2008. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yep. Yeah, more like 1980 something, whenever that tract went in.
Well, somebody voted in 2008, right?
2008 was the last increase for this assessment.
So the residents at that time voted, and we had a lot more people here at that public hearing, but they did vote to assess themselves.
But there was but the language wasn't worked in to tie in the CPI.
I would say that there is a difference in how one neighborhood is being treated than another, but there could be differences in the rationale behind it. But yes, one's assessed as cost increased, it can be passed on the other. As cost increases, the city has to bear that burden.
Wow.
In that case, though, it sounds like the particular neighborhoods have agreed to that as part of their assessment district, though, right?
So I don't know the full history, but most of the time when you see assessments go in for maintaining some kind of public space, it happens when the developer is originally applying, because then there's only one property owner. So when the developer wants to get a development, which is in some cases discretionary, cities say, well, if you want us to approve that, we don't want to bear, or the taxpayers don't want to bear the burden of maintaining it. So you have to agree to an assessment district, and that whole package gets approved. And then now it's subparceled and residents are in the homes. None of the residents would have voted for that assessment, but it's an assessment that they have to pay every year. And so that's commonly how it occurs.
And
in others,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
in other cities, neighborhoods see a vested interest for the neighborhood that we want some amenity, some higher level service, and we're willing to self-assess ourselves to be able to do so. And then the residents of a developed property can approve a maintenance district to cover those costs and accomplish that goal, thereby freeing the city from the obligation of covering that cost to do so. But then in that case, it's all the residents that have to vote for it in that neighborhood.
And yeah, in this case, so you're right, I believe it was the developer, and this is back when Via Verde was developing in the city at that time, and I wasn't part of that at all, it was before my time, but the city was struggling on how to handle the open space that was mandated by the Hillside Development Ordinance or zone, and how to handle that. And so you had hillsides, so this is mainly the Calle Alto street that goes around in a little kind of a rectangle or a curve, and the hillsides that are sloping down from that. So it is people's backyards. And the thing is, it's more efficient, and assuming residents are going to take care of that property, it actually costs them less if the city takes on that obligation. So back in 2008, I guess it was, there's some point where you have to start the process, like Scott was saying. I don't know if it's in January or some time, so you give yourself enough time to hold the election and all that kind of stuff, and then you just go with what the people vote for. One of the problems with this particular tract is there are a couple small streets that are interior and have no slope. So the city's not doing anything for them. But they're still part of the assessment district and have to pay the exact same amount of money as people with the big slopes in the back. So it's an interesting conundrum, and next year we could try to see what they think and have some discussions. How much would they be willing possibly to take a vote on? But as you said, this year we're not doing that.
That's correct.
I suppose so. If this were to not be brought up in the future as far as increasing the assessment, at some point the city would probably want to absolve itself of the obligation to maintain the hillside, and I guess the choice of the residents at that time would then be, do they either want to form an HOA, do they want to maintain each of their own slopes themselves at their own cost out of pocket, or do they want to then reestablish the assessment and increase it, is my understanding, right?
That is correct.
So we're talking 2027.
That's, I believe, when it sunsets. Yeah.
Over the last several years or decades or whatever you want to say, how much contact or communications have we had with all three of these assessment districts? I mean, reaching out to the residents to, communicate with them.
I know I wasn't here, but I believe that if this comes back each year, there is some outreach that is done to the residents. So, for example, the nature of the outreach might change. So, for example, with Northwoods, the outreach would be informing them that we don't plan to change the assessment at this time, whereas the outreach for Boulevard might look a little bit different, and it would explain that staff is recommending that the assessment increase. So that's,
I guess my question would be, did we reach out to them prior to this hearing?
Yes, we did.
Okay. So everybody was notified, or at least we believe everybody was notified?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It seems to me like anybody that's been on council for any duration of time is complicit in watching this continue without ever tying it to CPI. I wonder, can we pass a resolution or something consolidating all of the landscape districts and marrying them to CPI increases?
We cannot do that unilaterally. You would still require a vote of the residents that for that assessment district. But what you could do is pass a resolution establishing a policy, the direction of the council, because I think multiple council members raised the issue, how we're financing improvements, public improvements or private improvements or mutual good improvements is different. And so the landscape tax applies across the board to the whole community. An assessment district applies to an assessment district. And in 1978, there could have been good rationale for one way. And then in 1988, when a different neighborhood or development was occurring, there's a good rationale for a different way. But what you end up We're fortunate not to be like some other cities, and Chico is an example. Chico has more than 200 assessment districts, different assessment districts. And you're trying to manage different assessment districts, which means when you do work in one assessment district, that's 30 minutes, you have to assess 30 minutes to that. And then to another assessment district a little bit differently. Because anytime you change an assessment, you have to do an engineer's report that substantiates the costs associated with that assessment work in that assessment district. Well, there's something that came to fruition as we're looking at these assessments, and it was something we've already identified in the city in the last year. How we budget for our personnel is a little bit different than other cities. And so if you go through our budget document, you could see city manager and a dollar amount, assistant city manager, public works, maintenance worker, and a dollar amount. Those are all the cash compensation portions of the cost. It doesn't include benefits, so those are bifurcated. And most of our positions are paid for out of the general fund, irrespective if they're eligible to be paid for by other funds. We've changed that a little bit when it comes to the housing funds, because those are legitimate sources of revenue that you can cover costs. And the best practice is you first utilize the most restrictive revenue source before you get to the general fund and the unrestricted. We've been using the unrestricted first. And so when it comes to, I believe it's Northwoods district, the cost associated with the work is greater than the assessment. And one of the aspects is when our people do work there, the items we purchase may be assigned there, but the staff time associated with it is still paid for by the general fund. So the dollar amounts that you're seeing are not reflective necessarily of the true cost to the general fund of supporting the activity. And so, I mean, there's a lot we're trying to fix and become more transparent with, but we can't do everything overnight. But I do know that part of the goal is an assessment district is intended to fully cover its own cost. And so and we want to get to that point where it is covering that cost until the council itself passes a policy direction that says there's a public interest in subsidizing that cost in some fashion, but you take an affirmative vote to do that as opposed to the natural evolution of an assessment occurring in that fashion.
It was handled after this in most all developments that we required a homeowners association. And if we had a homeowners association at that time, we wouldn't be in this problem right now.
You bring up a good point, and we've had conversations with a homeowners association in the city that has a tremendous amount of open space and trees and maintenance that they're maintaining. Their ask was that could the city take this over for us? It's too costly for us. Well, the city may be the city, but the city is also has to look after the best interests of the collective whole. No, we don't want to take on costs that we don't absolutely have to, because it degrades our ability to provide all the general services across the whole city, public safety services, things that are that the general tax base has to support. So we have to be careful when we look at how we approach that. An HOA, absolutely. If there's an area that could be maintained holistically, forming a district or an HOA that can cover that cost makes better sense. Asking the city to cover the maintenance and the expense costs with that, we could do that, and in some cases there's an economy of scale because we do get better pricing usually because we do work across the whole city instead of a small neighborhood of 19 homes. But that increases the risk that a contract change could occur, something changes, and the city then has to then bear the cost for that specific neighborhood.
Thank you. Any further questions? Have a motion?
Oh, the public hearing, Mayor.
Oh, sorry. Open up the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this matter, please come forward. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. Now we'll ask for a motion.
Move approval of resolution 22-28.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Oh,
Read
I'm
by
sorry.
title.
Resolution 2022-28, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Dimas, County of Los Angeles, confirming the diagram and assessment for fiscal year 2022-2023 for Open Space Maintenance District Number 1, Annexation Number 3, Tract 32841 Northwoods.
Move to waive further reading and adopt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 5-0. We have a public hearing regarding setting the citywide landscape and parcel tax for fiscal year 2022-2023 and adoption of resolution 2022-29. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This item pertains to the citywide parcel tax, and the funding is used to basically pay for park maintenance to maintain public areas, public parks, parkways and medians, trees, pays for utilities, irrigation systems. This was established by the city in 1997, and the goal was to generate 100% of the funds that are used to maintain these areas. Per Ordinance 1086, the tax rate is determined annually by the City Council after a public hearing. The tax rate may be adjusted to reflect changes in the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index. This is a fund where this really pays for all the activities of our two main contractors. One would be WCA, West Coast Arborists. They assist with all of our tree maintenance. And we have another contract with Nieves Landscaping. They perform the majority of the work in the parks and at the Sportsplex also. Both of those contracts are, we're contractually obligated to increase those in accordance with the Consumer Price Index. Both of those will be increasing by as much as 8.5% in the coming year. And one of those contracts, we know that it's up for bid again next year, so we know that we need to bid one of the big contracts. And I obviously can't speculate what's going to happen, but I would guess that it's going to come in higher and be more expensive going forward and not less expensive. So that being said, what staff is recommending is that the City Council will adopt the resolution to increase the parcel tax by 8.5% to correspond to the increase in the Consumer Price Index. Right now, if we do nothing at all, if we keep the same assessment, it's anticipated that the city would need a general fund subsidy of about $229,000 to support the park maintenance activities. If the city approves staff's recommendation of the 8.5% increase, that's about $5.31 per household over the year. It's about 44 cents a month. This would actually generate about $76,000, and this fund would continue to require a general fund subsidy, but instead of $229,000, it would be down to about $152,000. So it would make some headway towards making this fund whole again. And of course, the parcel tax is really set up to collect 100% of the funds that are used to provide this service. So I'll take any questions council may have.
I think, from what I understand, this was the parcel tax that we deferred over the past couple of years due to COVID. Is that correct?
That is correct.
When was the last time we assessed it?
Do you know, Steve?
2019?
Yeah. 2018-19 fiscal year is what I'm hearing.
So that was 4 years ago, I guess. Now, you mentioned the deficits, and I see the ones that would be if we increased it, if we don't increase it. Do you know what the deficit was this year in this particular, for this work to be done, minus the landscape parcel tax?
Council member, I know we're using terminology.
Yeah, correct anything I said.
Deficit, surplus. There is a lot of activities the city performs where we don't generate 100% cost recovery for the activity. That doesn't mean that there is a deficit for the activity. And so the intent of the tax was to fully pay for all the work that was contemplated, and it was adjusted when the CPI wasn't in that tax before to ensure that we increased the cost to match the cost of services that are being provided. To the extent the city council desires not to fully receive cost recovery, you're making an active decision to subsidize the activity. And the activities of parks and landscape and whatnot in many cities are general fund activities. And it's a general fund cost that then, when you budget, you're sharing the priorities of police versus parks versus libraries if you had one, or other activities. And so I don't want to give the false impression to the public that we've created a deficit in this fund. The council took, good measure and considered during the pandemic. You didn't want to increase the landscape tax during the pandemic. It resulted in us having to subsidize with the general tax base, the general fund, and that's a call the council can make. But going forward, because it's a restricted revenue source, the same philosophy and best practice that occurs on how you pay for your staff applies to how you look at revenues to pay for activities. If there's a restricted source like this that can only be used for these limited uses, you look to that covering as much of that cost as possible and minimizing the cost from the general fund to support that. That's the best practice. It's not a requirement, it's just the best practice. So when I look at this and how it was set up to do a CPI, had the city continued doing CPIs through every year and not stopped at all, you would have been generating a fund balance in the bottom line. The fund balance doesn't mean that you're overtaxing the taxpayers. It just means that you have to make cognizant decisions about how you utilize those resources, or cognizant decisions on whether you approve a future increase in that CPI. And so the city for many years had been building a fund balance until approximately 17, 18, where I think we had about $115,000 fund balance, if I remember correctly. And the expenses with the contracts we had exceeded the revenue coming in, and we started whittling down the fund balance. And the decisions to not pay for that were active decisions to say, we'll subsidize it, that's okay, because it's the pandemic. And so the council can choose to approve an increase, not approve the increase, and still incur the subsidies. But I don't want to give the impression that we're creating a deficit, had created a deficit, or it is a deficit going forward. It is a policy decision of the council.
So I understand that, and so maybe subsidy is a good word, or shortfall, but whatever you want to call it, the landscape parcel tax, as you said, in the early years, paid for all the work that we needed to do that we're talking about. Medians, parkways, weed abatement, trees, everything, all that kind of stuff, maintenance of trees. And I'm looking in the staff report that this coming year, we're anticipated to spend, I'll round it off, $1.1 million, a little bit more, on these activities. The landscape parcel tax is going to cover a portion of that. If we do the increase, it'll cover everything but $152,000, again, rounding it off, which we probably would say, let's have the general fund pitch in. Can I use that word, pitch in? So not subsidy, not deficit, we're going to pitch in from the general fund. If we don't do that, I'm just saying, this is a question, but I'm just reading, if we leave it the same, the general fund, assuming all the services are the same, would have to pitch in $230,000, $229,000. And my question was, what did the general fund have to pitch in this year, the current year that we're just ending? I'm just wondering, is it less than what we're, or what the number is?
Okay, so just to give a little bit of the history of what we have in the budgets. So the 2021 actuals ended with a fund balance of about $166,000 in Fund 8. Okay.
Say it again, Michael.
And at the end of 2021, the fund balance in Fund 8 was about $166,000 was in there. For this current year, we're estimating that balance to go down to is about 111. So about 55,000 of that Fund 8 is going to be going down. And then the next year, with everything, we're pretty much predicting the balance will go down to zero. So that 111,000 be eaten up. Plus, we're transferring in about 87,000 from the general fund in order to make it zero.
Right. So I'm understanding
it's around $200,000+ in order to.
It should be noted that this tax was approved by the public. It wasn't. It was required by the public in a vote, and they overwhelmingly approved it. So I would think that the public considers their landscaping in a rather serious manner, and I would urge the council to vote for option number 1, which is the increase.
We have a public hearing coming up here.
Yeah.
Michael, you mentioned one last question to wrap this up. You mentioned two numbers. You were saying a fund balance at the end of 2021, and then you were saying there was another number that the general fund pitched in because we had a fund balance.
Right. So for most years, the general fund has been sending transfers in to Fund 8. And when things came in a little lower, those transfers, we continued to do the transfers in, so it helped build up that balance. So it wasn't like that balance just built up on parcel tax money alone. It's been subsidized by the general funds for quite some time. In fact, in that same year, 2021, we put in $20,000 from the general fund because we were predicting that I was going to need it. But the way it's looking now with all the increase the last few years is that fund balance can get drawn down pretty quickly, and where we're at today, especially with an 8.5% increase in the contracts, that we're gonna have to continue to subsidize more every year going, especially if we don't at the very least do this to try to minimize it somewhat.
And
Right, thanks.
there's more than just the contract increases that go there. If you remember, staff came forth and talked about palm trees, about the maintenance on the palm trees were occurring once every 2 years. The best practice is that palm trees should be maintained on an annual basis. And so there was an added cost associated with that. Well, that added cost falls to impacting this account. It is the best practice, and the risk associated with a palm, I'll say this incorrectly, frond, that falls on a resident, is significant in terms of the injury. So of course, we're going to maintain that annually. And so we have to understand that every time we make a decision when it pertains to our medians, our parks, our trees, our park strips, it's a call against the landscape parcel tax. And that call against the landscape tax is, in the last couple of years, has required the revenues or the expenditures exceed the revenues. And we look to fund balance, which has been supported by the general fund. That will be exhausted, and then it's completely going to be subsidized by the general fund. So we have to know when we make that decision, it truly is a call against just all the general activities that we could pay for. And so in the landscape tax, I can speculate what our costs are going to be next year when the Nieves contract goes to bid. We get pretty darn good pricing and have had pretty darn good pricing. I think it's going to be more. And so whatever actions we take today may have a number associated going forward, but once we bid that contract, because it's significant, that needs to be considered in the longer term window of what we want to do with this. And it may be a topic going forward. We should have a study session discussing how do we deal with all the landscape, all the maintenance, all the parks. How is it funded? How is it paid for? What we want to see going forward, and the council can set a good direction as to how do we proceed.
Yeah, Chris, I think there needs to be like a full accounting head to toe on what's going into this fund and to Parks and Rec. I think that listening to this, and Michael, you said for some time there's been a pull from the general fund on this. I think that council priorities on unfunded pet projects have drawn this down too, and I think we just need to really flush that out. We might have to back into what the voters passed and where we're at, so it all intersects to where it needs to be. I understand that some people prioritize trees and open space and all of that, but to what cost? And right now we're being mindful as we exit the pandemic through recovery on everything we need to do to keep the city running. And also, did we reduce, I don't remember running Parks and Rec programs during COVID, but I know Parks and Rec staff assisted like with San Dimas Cares and stuff like that, right? So we still had staff working, providing services to the public through that time, despite the fact that council chose not to, we didn't continue those programs, the Parks and Rec programs per se, but we still did incur an expenditure to keep our people working and to provide service to the public, correct?
Correct, and it was general fund funded for the most part.
Okay, and then some of that's reimbursable funding, I would imagine, from
a lot of the SD CARES went against the grant money we got from CARES Act.
Okay.
So it was just kind of lumped in with everything that was associated as eligible expenditures for that grant. So
Okay.
we were able to subsidize some of those salary costs with that program or that
So
grant.
we're able to offset some of that expense then. Cool.
If it was eligible, we did the same thing with the ARPA money. If it's eligible expenses that that the federal regulations allow for, we'll go for it. Because again, we go for the most restrictive source before the unrestricted.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Okay, this is a public hearing matter. The public hearing is open. Anyone wishing to speak to the council? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. Council?
I just want to say that I think, the fact that this is a voter-approved landscape tax, I think speaks volumes. I appreciate that we deferred the increases over the past couple of years due to the uncertainty in the pandemic. And I will say that I do think that residents of the city appreciate a well-maintained median, parkways, and parks, because that is what makes us unique in the San Gabriel Valley and amongst our surrounding cities. So I guess if anybody else has anything, I'll move approval of Resolution 2022-29.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I think I'll just say I'll support the motion, but I do think we need a full accounting of all of this. I just think that there's a lot of expenses, especially when I got elected. There's a lot of discussion in the beginning about Parks and Rec and priority. I vividly remember even the discussions regarding the swim and racquetball club. And as we know, council, for a long time before I got elected, that thing had gone and gone and gone. There was deferred maintenance and things just haven't happened. And it's to the point where, it's just bubble gum holding it together at this point. So I think that we need to look at what we're doing and what we're prioritizing in Parks and Recreation. And I think, the landscape, the medians, for example, I know we had a huge project and we're putting in drought tolerant landscaping and stuff like that. Those things are going to help us save money in the end and be conscious of where we're at in time, especially with the drought and everything else looming, and those are things that we should prioritize. But on the other hand, there's a lot of things that I know we talk about when budget time comes, and until we have a full accounting of what's really going on there, I can't see supporting, like expanding, like the urban forest, for example. I just can't see expanding that at a time when we really are sitting here going through, I think, shortfall or whatever the choice words are. But the bottom line is there's not enough acorns in the bank to deal with this. So,
Like the tree metaphor.
Yeah. So, and I don't know what squirrel got them.
We need more squirrels.
Yeah, we got plenty of squirrels around here. So the bottom line is, we need to figure this out. We really do. And then we can reinvest in whatever we need to.
I agree. I like the idea of a full accounting, because what it would show to me is what we are using the money for. And it's great because then we can say, well, do we like having this playground equipment updated? Do we like having, trees on that street? Do we like having a median that looks nice like that? And do we? I agree with what Eric said. And I think all of us are cognizant that the way the city looks is just a benefit to not only the residents, but people who visit and people who leave and then come back saying, boy, San Dimas looks pretty good. I thought the pastures were greener someplace else, but maybe they weren't so much. So I fully support that in the future, Ryan. So I would definitely.
But I don't think it's a problem using the general fund for landscaping. I think the public expects it. And as Eric said, that's one of the things that distinguishes us from other cities. And if we can, and taxes are used for a lot of reasons, but I think that's a good reason to use your tax. Right.
That's a great policy discussion to have, and like a lot of other policies we've talked about, we want to have a discussion so we can actually have a policy and that can guide us forward.
Right, and I agree with that. I think, to the point, I agree people want to have beautiful medians and all of that. That to me is a completely separate issue from how we fund those things. I wouldn't entirely agree that everybody agrees with general fund expenditures offsetting some of these things. And I think that's what we have to flush out in terms of a policy discussion later. So, yeah.
And if I may, in the council at a number of previous meetings has talked about this. You know, I think the last meeting or the meeting before, we approved the strategic plan, bringing a consultant to do more strategic planning. You saw during the study session or the council meeting regarding the budget in the study session, we talked about program-based budgeting, and you saw the tree program, for example, where we try to integrate the costs from all the different sources and all the revenues coming from different locations to give a better picture of what we're spending money on. And I think that this is a perfect area to dive deeper and get a better understanding about everything that's happening from the revenue, the expense, both personnel and non-personnel, and then frame that for the strategic conversation about where do we want to go and how do we want to pay for it. I think it's perfect timing to do so.
I agree, and I just want to clarify because it is election time and people are silly. I'm not advocating for Fern Gully or some sort of hip piece with me and a chainsaw and deforesting the city. So we're abundantly clear about that. I think we have plenty of trees, and it's great being a tree city. Let's plant more trees. I'm just saying we need to make sure that we have the revenue sources in line so we can support what we have responsibly, and the money that people do pay in taxes, that we're responsible with it and prioritizing it accordingly. The landscape tax, for example, going to landscape makes a lot of sense. And I 100% support the people that supported that. We just need to make sure that that's where it's going. And if it's not sufficient, as Councilmember Ebner pointed out, then maybe it's something we need to revisit and see if people, how much they do prioritize it, and we can go from there. But people did not prioritize taxes here a couple elections ago. And, you know, I think that's a discussion for all of us to flush out. So,
I can't tell you how many times a month I get a phone call concerning the medians. One, they're great. Next minute, 5 minutes later, somebody will call and say, hey, when are you going to work on that median? The reality is we just worked on it. When you look at it, you go up there and see what they're trying to say, and it's really, you look at it and you just kind of shake your head and rattle it. Then you call Parks and say, what can we do to improve this? And they said, well, we just did this and whatever. People do look. They look every day. They go to work. They turn into business complexes. They look at their complex. They look at when they pull out. They do look. And I believe that you know, the general fund has for a long time subsidized it, and it's kept it going. And a little bit of money that we did defer for, I think, 2 years or 4 years. People understand why we did it, and I'm going to be supportive of this motion. I'll take a motion.
Yep, we have a motion. We'll read by title.
Resolution 2022-29, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Dimas, County of Los Angeles, setting the special citywide parcel tax for fiscal year 2022-2023 to be used for landscape maintenance purpose.
And I'll move approval and waive further reading.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Oral communications, members of the audience, speakers, and limited to 3 minutes, as may be determined by the chair. Anyone wishing to speak to the council? Do we have any cards? No cards?
No cards.
Anybody in the chamber wishing to speak to the council? Seeing none, we'll move forward. City manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city is holding its first Days of Dialogue meeting tomorrow with a sold-out crowd. It actually went really fast. This event is intended to bring the community together and have real conversations about difficult issues. The city is thankful to our partners, the Bonita Unified School District, McKinley's Children's Center, and the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department for being a part of this, and I may add, for contributing staff and or costs towards the full cost associated with this program. The event starts tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pre-registrations are required, so we will not be able to take walk-ins. Parking will be a little challenging given that it's also the farmers market, but we've actually designated parking in several locations that are specifically intended for folks that are attending the Days of Dialogue. So we look for a very robust conversation with 100 individuals from all these organizations. In terms of the goal line, I think if you drive down Bonita, you probably realize that letters are going on to the overpass over Bonita Cataract. And so they started that today, this morning. Bonita Cataract will be fully closed as of June 13th for construction, and we anticipate that to be closed for approximately 60 days. On the legislative front, the city took a formal position to oppose Senate Bill 9, which would allow the lot splitting of single-family homes and allowing for the constructions of up to 4 units. We believe strongly that the city should have the right to establish its zoning and development requirements of property based on our general plan and other specific plans and guidance. A new bill, Assembly Bill 2011 by Assemblywoman Buffy Wicks, is an affordable housing bill that creates a ministerial, streamlined approval process for developments that are 100% affordable in commercially zoned areas and for mixed-use housing along commercial corridors. While it sounds like that's great, it helps us towards our affordable housing goals. The legislation would override our land use authority and eliminate public input from determining what happens and where it happens within our city. Additional requirements of the bill for prevailing wage and including provisions which would require certain developers to retain apprenticeships through an approved state apprenticeship program would add to the cost in constructing development projects. The bill also includes added requirements for the city specifically, such as certifying contractor compliance and reporting, and it prohibits the city from imposing any requirement, including additional fees to cover requirements that may be mandates on us for the cost of these new requirements imposed by the bill. The bill also exempts these ministerial projects from CEQA. Based on our previous opposition to the removal of our local control in SB 9 and the impacts of this bill, I sent a letter to the bill's author and our Senate and Assembly delegations opposing the bill, as there was a short timeline for us to provide or whether support or opposition to this bill because it's actually being considered. And so the League of California Cities had asked cities to send letters of opposition towards this bill. And I made that call based on your previous call that local control is important to us, which is why we opposed SB 9. And if we want to continue the mantra that we want to control our future development destiny, this is a bill we absolutely do not want proceeding.
I think you made a good choice.
Thank you.
I think if you read the bill, it also doesn't allow the city to set any parking standards.
Correct.
And that could be disastrous.
I know that we don't have an absolute policy from the council as to when do we send letters or not send letters, and does the city manager send it, or does the council have to vote to take a formal position? But I think we were pretty safe on this one, that you gave direction in terms of local control. And we're actually working on a policy to determine when we actually want to take
the Council of Government has also come out against this bill.
Correct. That's the end of my update, Mr. Mayor.
City Attorney?
No reports tonight, Mayor.
Members of the council reports on meetings attended but at the expense of the local agency.
Mr. Mayor, I attended the California Contract Cities Association conference. It was educational, and I attended with a few of my colleagues who I'm sure will sound off.
I too attended that conference. There were a number of sessions. I'm going to report on one briefly. It was about water and infrastructure, and it gave an example of something that, and I'm not sure what the agency is, but it's an LA County agency. These projects are super expensive, so they chose one part of the watershed in the San Gabriel Valley, which was the Alhambra Wash. That's like a 5.5-mile channelized wash going through, I think it starts up in San Marino, gets down to El Monte and Alhambra. I'm not sure exactly the cities, but in that area. The thing that was noteworthy to me was that some of the ideas that they had for making this better environmentally, saving water, and actually an economic benefit, because some of the things they were thinking about were actually covering the wash in some spots and making little parks there for the residents to have where they might not have enough park or parks nearby. They also, some of the other things were creating rain gardens. So that's like a little swale that's like in front of your property. I mean, you can do it in an individual home. They were focusing a little bit on industrial and commercial and even park property where you could take the runoff and it would end up, instead of running into the street and gutters, would soak in this rain garden. You plant that and maintain it, and it's a nice little thing, and it saves the water. And of course, planting trees. A lot of the, for whatever reason, some of the disadvantaged communities have a lot fewer trees than the more advantaged communities, and so planting the trees, all these things help the environment. And I thought it was an interesting presentation on how to fight the drought and make communities more beautiful at the same time, and help people enjoy their communities more. So that was one of the sessions I went to.
Thank you.
I also attended California Contract Cities. One of the sessions that I found particularly interesting was as it related to the housing crisis and how jobs and workforce development kind of dovetailed into that, and some outside of the box thinking, getting creative when it comes to solutions. It was a little bit of a stretch. I don't think that those suggestions are probably going to go anywhere, but it was very refreshing to hear some common sense ways to address the housing crisis by bringing jobs to new housing rather than new housing to the jobs.
Mayor, I didn't know everyone was going to report. Can I report something then?
Yes.
All right. Well, I will say on the dovetails of Councilman Weber's comments, one major takeaway from that particular session that he's talking about is don't take pictures with politicians that you don't support their policies. And put simply, if they're voting for things like SB 9 and SB 10 or decreasing crimes or penalties for felons with ammunition and all kinds of other stuff, don't support them. And put simply, don't retweet them, don't post a picture with them, don't acknowledge them. It's kind of interesting, but one of the consultants did talk about that, and all these folks, you see a state senator or an assembly person, and then you see them walking down the street, and you want to take your picture and be like, oh, I saw this person, but really you're just boosting name recognition for them and helping further contribute to the problem. So don't contribute to the problem. And yeah, we won't get into the needles example from one of the speakers, but needless to say, don't take the shot, I guess. As it relates to housing, to be clear, that's going to bite me later. All right, it's already out there. The heck with it. It was about housing, so we're clear.
I too attended the conference. I actually thought it was more of the conference itself was very, very well run. They had a lot of good sessions, but it was very noticeable that in case anybody hasn't figured it out, there's a sheriff's election coming very soon, and the people that are running for sheriff were out there in force, and they all got a different theory on how to make everything safer, and all of them came out of law enforcement. So it'll be interesting. There is also a supervisor position being run. Okay, 3 or 3,000. I'm not sure the exact number of candidates for a supervisory position, and they were out in force. So they spent a lot of time coming to sessions. You could see them in the sessions, and you could see them talking. And it'll be interesting to see how these things all progress as we go. I think there's a lot of good candidates looking for a lot of support, and as we know, it's very important to us to choose a superintendent, a supervisor that's going to work for all of us, would work together with all 5 supervisors, and to have a sheriff that's motivated and keeps the community in perspective. And it's like anything else. his people, his or her people, have to respect her, or him or her, and get some stuff done. I think that with the sheriffs, in our city, I don't think we could ask for a better agency. I appreciate that wholeheartedly. Every time somebody calls up or something, I don't get very many, comments about somebody not being happy. It's always positive, and I appreciate that. And Captain, I would commend you and your people for the professionalism that you show to the city. All right. Okay, we're going to go to regular comments now.
Commissioner, sir.
Council, this is just an announcement that there isn't a vacancy on the Senior Commission. The flyer has been posted. It's on the city's website. It's been out through social media, and it is on K-West. It is for an expired term, and it is for appointment to 3 two-year terms to expire in 2026. The recruitment is running through the second week in June. And then once the applications are brought back in, I will bring to council a request to set interviews and let you know how many applications have been received.
Do we know whose terms expired?
Mr. Brochet.
Okay, he's done a good job over the last 6 years. Appreciate that. All right, so there is a expired term for a senior commissioner. City Council requests for future items, comments, and updates. Dennis.
Well, we talked about taxes. I'm going to talk about something that doesn't cost any taxes. Should make people happy. And that's the Super Service Station gas pumping program for San Dimas seniors. If you know of someone that has problem servicing their car with gas and they're a senior, there are 5 stations that will do this for them. There's an ARCO station, a Chevron station, a Mobil station, a Shell station, and a Unocal station. And what you want to do if you're a senior and you need this service is that you go to the senior center and you sign up and you get a card like this. It says Super Service Station Assistance Needed. And this gives the hours that they can do it and the days that they can do it. It's usually Monday through Friday. And this is a great service for seniors because a lot of seniors can't pump their own gas. I don't think it applies to anyone here, but we do know seniors that do have trouble doing this. The other thing is, mark your calendar, on June 15th, Music in the Park starts. And that's lots of fun. It's the same night, it's on Wednesday nights. It's the same night as the farmer's market, and it's a great evening. Go to the farmer's market and go to Music in the Park. The Music in the Park lasts until July 27th, and that's the first one is June 15th.
Eric?
Well, I have trouble fueling up my car at the gas station, but it's just financing the fuel to put in it. Just to mention, a few of us from the council went and attended a ribbon cutting ceremony at La Villa Kitchen. It's not a new ribbon cutting ceremony for a business that's just been established. I think La Villa has been a stakeholder, especially in the Villa Verde area, for many, many years. And I just wanted to recognize them. That it was a ceremony just recognizing them for joining the Chamber of Commerce, which is fantastic for them to be a part of. And I just wanted to recognize them and mention that because they are very important in the community, and many of us are frequent customers there as well. So, and then I think we have Memorial Day coming up, and I just wanted to wish everybody a safe and happy Memorial Day, and remember the reason that we're getting a holiday out of that, and just keep the people in mind that sacrificed everything that they have to give us everything that we have now. And that's it.
Don?
Sure. Well, I certainly echo what Eric said about Memorial Day. Couldn't have said it better. Let's see, just two ththings, actually. One is that, as we all know, the Gold Line construction has been going on and on and on. And San Dimas Avenue, south of Bonita, opened up a couple weeks ago. And then yesterday, I think it was, they closed it from the tracks to the to Bonita Avenue to do the final striping, final paving, final striping. And I'm telling you, they use quick dry paint because, you know, they paint it and a few minutes later people can drive on it. One of the things that they did in that was the median, this is between Bonita and the tracks, southbound there, the median had to be moved a little bit to the west. I got a call last night from a cyclist who was concerned because that was already a narrow slot that you had to go through. Even for cars, you're going a narrow slot. But it decreased by some amount. I'm not sure what it is. But from what his experience was and what he explained, and then I went out this morning and took a look at it, there is no way a bicycle and a car can get through that area between the corner, basically, all the way where the Goodyear is, to the tracks, side by side with the car. It just is too dangerous. So, something should be, it seemed like something should be done. I gave Sherry Garwick a call this afternoon, or this morning, I guess it was, and talked about a couple things. Eventually, at some point, Sharrows, those ones that say bicyclists and cars can share the road here. Obviously, it's the laws say a bicycle is a vehicle, and you can share the road, but motorists don't often take that to heart, and the Sharrows do help. Eventually, that might be a good idea, or whatever other solution. But by this evening, the contractor, at Sherry's insistence, had gone out there and put one of those A-frame traffic barricade things on the sidewalk with a bicycle icon and a share the road sign right under it. So, that's, I think it was that urgent, and I really am glad to report that we took such action so quickly to help protect the cyclists who want to use that part of the road. So I just wanted to mention that. The only other thing was we have an election on June 7th. Urge everyone to vote. There's many places you can go to get information. lavote.gov is one. The city's website has a whole bunch of information about elections and how to vote, where to vote, all that kind of stuff, or links to other sites that have that information. And then I'll mention my website has some information as well. So happy voting, everybody. And at our next meeting, that'll be after the election, and we can all relax. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, John. This is going to sound a little bit like pardon me?
That's all right. Go ahead. I'll I know you're eager.
Yeah, last time I forgot Eric. This time I wanted to show you that I could forget you.
No, I'm with you. We might get out of here at 8:30, so I'm with you. One is, the Contract Cities Association, the League of California Cities, SCAG, the council participates in a lot of different things outside of this community, for this community. And so that includes mosquito and vector control, SCAG, the COG. So I point all that out to say that, anyone that's under the illusion that all we do is come here on Tuesday nights and hang out on the second and fourth Tuesday, feel free to come and meet with me. I'll tell you what's really going on with a few of us that get pulled to those things. And every council member up here is involved in a lot of different things. Some of it's regional, some of it's local, some of it's educational, working with the district, etc. So, I applaud everybody on council, and Dennis has done a long time with the COG, and I know that's a passion, and the Mountain Conservancy and all that. So, you see people's work come in that, especially with your tenure. So thank you for all you've done for that here. I attended the Public Safety Commission meeting the other night. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get to the teacher awards. There was a conflict in the scheduling, but the chamber had put together. But I will say the Public Safety Commission, the Fire Department gave their annual report. It's always very interesting to hear the Fire Department talk about what really isn't a lot about fires anymore. It's really more about medical emergency response and things of this nature, thankfully due to improvements in fire and life safety requirements and stuff like that. So it is one of those things where it's interesting where you actually see local and state regulations positively impact outcomes, and that is one of them. So the other is the Sheriff's Department gave their report on what's going on in the city, and the commission talked a little bit more about flock safety cameras and their recommendations to the city, which the council should see in the near future. But I appreciate the commission. As with all the commissions, you generally hear some good dialogue from people in the community, those commissioners talking about all the various things to consider as it relates to those things. And then yesterday, attended the Golf Course Advisory Committee. For those that are interested in the golf course, it's a very interesting relationship, much like the Equestrian Center and the city's involvement with the Equestrian Center. Council and the city has done a lot of things to improve the quality of life of the citizens here. And they've done that for a long time. But all of those things at some point, sunset, if you will. And so there's been a lot of things that have served the community for a very long time in a very meaningful way. And you're starting to see, just as you've seen the transition of senior staff in the last 5 years, a new city manager, new directors, new council members to include myself, there's a lot of change occurring. And so I say all that to say that it is a time for people to pay attention to what's going on in San Dimas and to watch what's been happening. With elections, I encourage everybody to vote, everybody to pay attention, everybody to do their homework, but everybody also to take stock in the fact that, there were a lot of people that worked hard in the council and the electeds of the past to get us where we're at today. I think the city's not in a bad position at all. In fact, we're going through change, and that's all we're doing. And as we evolve and we have sat here and rose to the challenge of COVID, we provided critical services, continued to provide critical services, staff came to work. We didn't actually have to deal with reopening City Hall, not in the way some communities did, because our staff showed up to work every day and worked hard for us. So with that, we also saw civil unrest throughout the county. And it's interesting, there was an article circulating around by somebody that I don't think has been in touch with anything that's been going on in the last 2 years in the Pasadena Star-News that wrote some hit piece, if you want to call it that. But it really wasn't rooted in anything factual. And I will say that I could not be prouder of the city during the time when there was civil unrest throughout the entire county, to include Diamond Bar and other places close by, that this city opened up the Plummer Building and did house a contingent of National Guard soldiers here. And it was awesome. And it was sad that we had to have them come in under nightfall because there were people in this community who would protest their presence. Very sad. But those people are also the people who are out there right now actively trying to influence this election. And so, again, do your homework. Tomorrow, Days of Dialogue comes out of a time in the last 24 months where there was calls of folks calling this community racist. And so, and saying that we had racial bias in policing and a hateful sheriff's station. So hopefully, I hope those folks are in attendance tomorrow with this Days of Dialogue. I applaud the Sheriff's Department, the city, McKinley's, the school district for all working together to put that event together for everybody in the community to build bridges, because I think that's what the majority of the city council has done, is work to build bridges, put our hand out repeatedly, and yet taken beatings for it for the last 24 months. Some of us more than others, some utterly unscathed, and even potentially complicit in all of it. But the bottom line is, I encourage everyone to get out there. Memorial Day is coming, and I know what Memorial Day is about, so I'm not going to thank the mayor and Councilman Weber, who both served, since it's not your day. Your day's Veterans Day. But nevertheless, there are people that fought for everybody's right for freedom, your right to vote, and I hope everybody exercises that. June 7th is the date. You can vote anywhere in Los Angeles County at flex centers throughout the county. Vote here, vote often, and get it done. Other than that, if anybody, as always, has anything, you can go ahead and call me, and I've always put out my number, and I will again, 909-480-1960. Happens to be the year the city was incorporated, so you can't forget that. And you can feel free to check out my council Facebook and just search my name, Ryan Vienna. You can always get in touch with me there. And if you have any questions, one of my colleagues said that I told a story. It was a fictional story last council meeting. There's nothing fictional about it, and I'm happy to fact share everything, including, well, whatever you want to see. But bottom line is, there's no storytelling here, at least not from me. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that was a comment about me, so let me just briefly.
No, John, it wasn't, so you don't need to respond.
Well, briefly say that my number is 909-646-2948, and I will definitely talk to anybody, as I do every single day. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to comment the fact that last Tuesday night I attended the Teacher of the Year award ceremony here in San Dimas at Life Pacific University. In case we didn't know it, a lot of people don't know it. San Dimas does have a university. It's a little smaller than others, but it is a university that's growing over across the street from Lone Hill. But it was nice. The room was full. Teachers from each of our schools in San Dimas were recognized by the city and by the district and the Chamber of Commerce. And we had 7 teachers that were there, along with their principals and their other cohorts in the way they educate. And it was a very nice event. As far as the room was full of people who cared. And I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to be there. And I think we got a great educational system here in San Dimas. Bonita's doing a good job. The teachers are doing great. So the next the next day is going to seem a little bit odd. 2 days later, I attended the award ceremony for Lone Hill School, of which Dennis normally does, but he had a conflict. And so he gave me the opportunity to go to Lone Hill, and they gave their presentations. And I mean, there were more kids getting awards for A's. We'd be so proud. We all need to be proud of what's going on with our youngsters. But it was a good event. And then yesterday, I attended the Shoal 5th grade class play of starring George Washington and all the other people that were involved in the Martha, and it was pretty interesting. Ben Franklin. It's amazing to see these youngsters, 5th graders, memorize the stuff that they needed to memorize and do the play. And it was very, very professional. And I want to thank the teachers that were working with them. I know this project's been going on for 4 or 5 months, and kids are learning. So I wanted to say that. One question I wanted to ask, Deborah, we squared away with flowers for the Pompey Memorial?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to read something that was submitted by one of our residents, Gary Enderly. And I'd like to read it, and I would we hope that everyone realizes that there are people out there who care. Thursday, June 9th, 2022, is the 28th anniversary of the tragic death of Glendora Police Officer Louis Pompey. Officer Pompey, a resident of San Dimas, was off duty at the Vaughn's Market in Villa Verde. He was standing in the checkout line when two young men were pistol whipping a store employee while attempting to rob the store. After Officer Pompey identified himself as a police officer, both robbers opened fire, hitting him 6 times. While he was mortally wounded, he returned fire, wounding both the robbers. Officer Pompey died 6 hours later at San Dimas Community Hospital while in surgery. In honor of Officer Pompey's heroic action, a special remembrance ceremony will take place at the Officer Louis Pompey Memorial in Villa Verde, San Dimas at Puente and Villa Verde at 10 a.m. Thursday, June 9th. The public is welcome to end. Officer Louis Pompey, he will never be forgotten in this community. And with that, I would ask that we close in his memory.
Mr. Mayor, if I could also piggyback on that, is keeping in our prayers the children that were shot today in the active shooter incident in Texas.
As we all know, it's we live in tragic times, and we just need to all pray and maybe the guy upstairs might look down at me. I don't normally do a lot of praying, but within myself, I know, and I hope he knows that I'm thinking. Thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion to close.
So moved.
Thank you.